A recent flag-burning incident at Hampshire College led the college to stop flying the American flag for a time. That then led to pro-flag demonstrations. Well, the flag is back up, but it all seems to have led to the president-elect tweeting that anyone burning the U.S. flag should lose their citizenship or be imprisoned. Well, we asked Bill Newman, Western Massachusetts representative of the American Civil Liberties Union, to come in and talk about all of that and more.
I think that the burning of the flag is something that actually inures to the detriment of the person who's burning the flag, because it is so painful for so many people, because it is so not just discourteous but dishonorable to do that, because it is so emotionally fraught. So I think that flag burning is a terrible way to demonstrate one's feelings. I think it's counterproductive. I think it's wrong. I think most people don't like it. Veterans, for very good reasons, by and large, hate it. But it's First Amendment protected activity. The Supreme Court is very clear. The First Amendment protects your right to burn a flag, burn a Russian flag, or a Cuban flag, or an Australian flag, or an American flag, because it in fact is expressive conduct. It in fact is First Amendment protected. And it's deeply disturbing when the President-elect of the United States does not understand that the First Amendment protects speech that you disagree with. It protects speech that you may hate or despise. It protects speech of those who otherwise would have no voice. It protects speech that is dishonorable. The most honorable part of America is that we protect that speech. That's part of the foundation of the United States. Free speech and a free press is what make us a free society. And for the president-elect to say, well, if you exercise your First Amendment right to free speech, you should lose your citizenship and go to prison, and not understand how enormously wrong that is, I find that deeply disturbing. And I think most people find it deeply disturbing. This is not to in any way endorse the flag burning personally, but to say that, yes, we have a First Amendment and we need to protect it and honor it and love it.
Let's talk about American Civil Liberties Union itself for a second, which always fascinates me. First presidential campaign I ever really covered, Michael Dukakis, 1988. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but as I recall, one of the big insults that the Bush people, Bush the father at that time, threw at him was, Michael Dukakis is a card-carrying member of the American Civil Liberties Union. Like that was some sort of crime, because everything I'd always known about the ACLU, and I don't think I'd met you at that time, almost 30 years ago, but everything I knew was it was an organization that speaks out for and defends the Bill of Rights and the Constitution of the United States, which it seemed to me, my young mind at the time, was something that George H.W. Bush would want to do.
Yes, because the president is going to take an oath, including Mr. Trump. He's going to take an oath to protect and preserve and defend the Constitution of the United States, which includes the right to free speech. It includes the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. It guarantees the right to due process. It guarantees a person who's accused of a crime a series of fundamental rights to fairness in the judicial process. It protects us against cruel and unusual punishment. It guarantees a reasonable bail. It, through the post-Civil War enactments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, guarantees equal protection. It says we all have the right to vote. And I thought that accusing Michael Dukakis of something wrong because he endorses those fundamental American values was wrong. Now, that actually came out of Governor Dukakis vetoing a bill that the Supreme Judicial Court had said was unconstitutional. And that bill was a bill to require students to say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning at school. The Supreme Judicial Court, in an advisory opinion, which our state Supreme Court can do, said that bill is unconstitutional. And then politicians, because they had their own agendas, passed it anyway. And Governor Dukakis said, wait a second, my Supreme Judicial Court just said this bill is unconstitutional. That's the final ruling on this piece of legislation. I'm the governor. I'm sworn to protect and defend and uphold the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I can't sign a bill that I know has been declared unconstitutional. And so there's an unconstitutional piece of legislation. Governor Dukakis vetoes it, as he was obligated, I think, morally to do, and it was politically unpopular, and then he was slammed by Mr. Bush for doing what his Supreme Judicial Court said he was obligated to do.
Let me bring us back to now, today. In preparation for you coming in, kind of spun through the ACLU of Massachusetts website. A couple of fascinating things there. And let me make it clear to folks, this is not an anti-Trump site. It's not. It's nonpartisan.
And I should make that clear. The ACLU is a nonpartisan organization. We don't endorse candidates. We just don't do it.
There's a fascinating posting, if that's the right word to use in this case. It basically says, are you upset about the election? Here's some things you can do. And very wisely you say, hey, defend rights, and one way is to support ACLU. But beyond that, a couple of interesting suggestions. In one it says, make sure you know your rights.
I think that the know your rights component of what to do if you are feeling that these are dire times, one thing to do personally, and I think also collectively, is to know your rights. What are your rights as a person in the United States? What are your rights to speak? What are your rights to protest? What are your rights to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures? What are your rights to vote? All of that, very, very important, because people who don't know their rights can be threatened, cajoled, or otherwise intimidated into not exercising them. And once that happens, I think we are in really serious trouble.
I know ACLU has said, and a lot of others have said, what about the Fourth Amendment on search and seizure? And that's a real area of concern now, I gather.
Well, I'm deeply concerned that President-elect Trump has said that he wants to make the law of the land something that is so clearly unconstitutional and that has been proven to be so racist in its administration. Stop and frisk is a policy that says, okay, a police officer decides you may have, for some reason that is not something that can be articulated, you may have some contraband on you, or you may be somehow involved in a crime. Totally personal, not based on objective evidence, just say perhaps your skin color or your apparent ethnicity or some religious garb. And so he can stop you and frisk you and pat you down, which, if you've ever had that done to you, is really an invasion of your privacy. It's really something that is uncomfortable, and it shouldn't be done in the United States because we don't have a police state where the police can just stop anyone they want, make them stay there, and then frisk them. We have a Fourth Amendment that says that you cannot be subject to that kind of police action unless there is reasonable suspicion or probable cause, depending on the circumstances. And to stop a person and search that person and seize that person and do that simply because of their skin color or their ethnicity or their religious garb, that is so totally un-American. It is so contrary to our values. It is so insulting to not only to the person who is being stopped and to the communities that are being intimidated, it's an insult to all of us who hold these values dear. So, is that a matter of concern? Yes, that's a matter of concern. It's a matter of concern you didn't understand that when this was going on in New York, it was found to be unconstitutional. It's true, as he points out, that the case did not go up to the appellate court, but almost every scholar and constitutional lawyer who looks at this says, this cannot stand, this cannot happen. But you change the courts, you change the personnel, who knows? But this is a would be a frightening development if stop and frisk somehow were brought back, not only in New York, but in other cities, other states across this land. I would fear for our freedoms greatly.
Bill Newman, ACLU of Massachusetts. A lot to think about, a lot to watch for in the months ahead. Thanks for coming in, sir.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.